Welcome to the Inflection Podcast, where we explore the pivotal moments that have shaped us into who we are today. I am your host, Anebi, and I can't wait to dive into these moments with you. Let's get it. All right. It's amazing to have you with me here today, Ian. Thank you so much for hopping on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah. So we met a little bit ago at the Phoenix Startup Week,
Yes.
and within a couple of minutes of talking with you, I was like, this dude is a real one. I want to get him on the podcast. You had very, amazing ideas on product design and development, all the way from concept to boom, shipped, done in the hands of customers. And I thought your unique approach at the Peterman Design Firm was quite interesting, all the way from marketing to brand legacy, design management, product development, and a term I have never heard before until you, experience coherence. What the heck does that mean? I looked at it as like, this is fantastic. How did you coin that?
Yeah, so that one throws almost everyone for a loop. So hopefully, at some point I'll get everybody to know what it means. It really came from kind of diving a little bit into my backstory. Started in
Yeah,
product development. I did that for over a decade and then was a partner at a design firm, and we incorporated through the partners. There were four of us: branding, sales. One of them was, he did sales for Verizon at the corporate level. So he understood like
wow.
big closing $1 million phone deals. So he understood from that really high level, the sales side of things. But we also did branding. We had one of the partners was an amazing graphic designer out of Hasbro. Did probably
Wow.
like Hulk toys. If you ever saw those like hand fists that you could hold, like he worked on that. Like he worked on big projects, big names. So we had the synergy between our experience and with my product background. We ended up getting a lot of clients that were like, hey, we want to start a new company. Basically, we need branding, we need all these little things. Basically people found out that we could do it all, and then they started asking us to do it all. And then that experience really expanded my kind of view on product, because I was really fluent in, napkin sketch to production. But that's
Yeah,
only like one part. If you actually look at like what it really takes to build a brand and build a company and launch a product, that's great. And there's all of this other branding and everything beyond that. And so when I launched my firm, after the partners went our separate ways, a couple went totally outside of design. I wanted to keep doing it, and so I eventually ended up sitting down and go, okay, well, what do you actually need to put it all together? And so I created Peterman method. It's part of how I came up with conscious design. And then in thinking through that with some of my team and other people I knew, is like, well, how do we talk about branding? And one of the things that a lot of people just don't understand, like if you say branding, there's an
yeah.
idea that pops in your head. And the most common one, if you talk to someone, is, well, I need a logo, a couple fonts, and a couple colors. There you go, brand.
Yep.
And we're like, well, that's technically what we would call a style guide. It's not really even a brand. And even if you work with a branding agency, which I worked with a few. I worked with a spa in LA, Surya Spa. I helped manage multiple agencies coming together. And that's what I ended up doing there, actually, is what I would call experience coherence, which is not just, it's every single touch point that a customer is ever going to experience the brand. A branding agency, like if you work with a specialized branding agency, they're really great at creating a really good brand, really good story, but they don't necessarily think about all the connection points past that. They may do some packaging, but they probably
Yeah.
aren't doing the ads. They probably aren't looking at how do you talk to people? How to, if you're building autoresponders in a little chat bot, like how do you do that? And so there's these so many touch points that happen for a customer. Really good product design, that's great. But the idea with experience coherence is you're creating a unified, actually thought out process for your entire customer journey and every single experience that they have. Because when you have this disjointed experience, when it isn't cohesive, that's where you get angry customers. So,
Exactly.
I use the example as, I think it was Starbucks, super great customer experience 99% of the time. And then there was like one time I was having technical difficulty. I like lost some points for something, and their tech support was the opposite of my in-store experience. And that was like, so I use that as example. Like when you have that, I was like, oh, this is bad. This is very bad. Like why
Yeah.
it suddenly dropped, my opinion of them. And so that's something that a lot of brands, I feel like, struggle with, is they are like, oh, we have a great product. We have even our customer service is really great, but there could be one little piece why maybe it's the technical support isn't in coherence with everything else. And that's where you lose people. You just have people go, oh, well, return it, I'm done. And they go to a competitor because that happened to be their point where it doesn't match everything else. So
Yeah.
it's really important. That's something that's like, well, this is really important if you're going to build a brand, and especially, working, if you have an existing one, it can be fixed. Like you can go through and adjust everything. But if you set out with that mindset at the beginning, we can save a whole bunch of headache in the future. So that
Absolutely.
I was a little long-winded, but that is the concept and idea behind when we say that experience coherence. It's like branding plus, however many pluses it is. It's
Yeah.
all those touch points for
I
some.
like it. I like it. And pretty much right. When your brand or your user experience across all the touch points for your brand, uh, if you have certain areas that are incongruent with other areas with the experience you're trying to push, then it can be discombobulating for your customers. Because I've been on the receiving end of that, and probably with companies I've built and tools I've built, I've probably been a perpetrator of that, of
I feel like we
an
all have at some
incongruent
point.
brand experience. And it's always a hairy thing, and something worth solving for. Would you say that process works better um, to build it with intentionality from scratch, from the ground up? Or have you had customers come to you where they really have an experience and it's more like cleanup and making it all cohesive?
We've definitely done both. I've been involved with both. I would say obviously it is cheaper, faster, and easier to just do it right the first time. So if you're
Yep.
starting like, and that's is one of the conversations I have with startups, and it's um we have this idea that like you can just whip together a startup and like you're there and you're gonna make it. Um, and so I do a lot of education with people that are on that early stage of, okay, well, yes, we can cook up a product and we can do all these things, but the idea that like you're going to save money by being cheap at first and skipping all these things is not real. It's better to go get the capital and do it right, because otherwise you're going to pay me 10 times as much in 5 years to fix all of it, and you'll have lost customers. It'll have become painful enough that it becomes worth at that point spending 10 times as much. So that means it's a big problem. That said, if somebody wants to fix it, I've definitely gone in and helped reinvigorate, figure out what those issues are, smooth out the process. I did that with the spa. Actually, we did a full rebrand. I went through all of their systems, all of their communications, their sales, uh, coordinated their ad agencies with their brand. Like there's a lot of like bringing together, because they had just, patchworked their way through almost 10 years. So that was a
Ooh,
lot
a
of
lot.
patchwork, and they were making millions of dollars at that time. So, but they were hitting a ceiling. Like they were not being able to really grow. There were a bunch of missed opportunities, like their e-commerce was like an afterthought. So like there's all these things that we ended up doing to help bring them. Now they're making millions and millions of dollars more than they
Wow.
were. So like it works, but it didn't become painful to them until they were at the point where they realized that they could have been making millions of dollars more if they had cut back on some costs that they didn't need to be spending, if they had systematized and really consolidated everything. And so ideally you don't hit that point. Like the goal is to, if you can, like do it earlier. So obviously easier. I would say definitely easier to do it first, but we can do it later as well. Like
Yeah.
there's no end date. It's not like it's your business doesn't become terminally ill and there's no way to save it. Like we can always go in and make adjustments and smooth out those problems. And I've worked with companies where they've figured this out through like surveys where they just survey their company, their employees, and they go, "Hey, what do you think?" And then they get some responses that surprise them. They go, "Oh, we thought it was all gravy, but it's not. Like there's these real things."
Absolutely.
And so that's another thing I always try to tell people, whether they're starting up, is data is key. Like start, even if it's you have 3 employees, ask the 3 employees what they think. Even if you have 2 customers, ask them, because if you don't know, there's no way for you to react to it. There's no way for you to fix it. And if you wait until you have thousands and thousands of customers and employees, it's going to be way harder to shift anything
Absolutely.
over,
Yeah.
especially if it's cultural, right? Then it becomes, you see some companies, they do huge layoffs or mass exodus. Sometimes it's not anything quote unquote bad, but sometimes they go, "Oh, we didn't think about the culture in the company, and we've shifted." And it could be positive, negative. I feel like some of that's a lot of your opinion, right? But either way, if the company shifts in culture, you're going to have people that suddenly don't fit, that could be amazing at their job, but they don't fit anymore. And so that also can induce turnover. So there's all these extra costs to not being really clear at the beginning, because things like culture are also going to be how people interact with you. That's part of your experience, right? If you have an experience with a customer, especially if you're doing customer support or sales, like you're going to get to know what the culture of the company is. So if it's a high pressure, high sales, like that's what it is. And if that's not what you want, if that's not what you want, you got to actively choose what you want. Otherwise, there's no guidance. And then
Yeah.
as soon as you're not small, it's just going to be like, well, I don't know, that we hired a manager and the manager is going to go hire whatever they think will work. But if there's not these really clear guidelines, then nobody can follow them. So you're going to get this randomized set of people and have this break in experience for your customers.
That's really key. And I've seen that play out again and again in so many different organizations and companies I've worked at. Definitely right on there. Like it makes sense to fix those issues earlier on with a few customers because it's a lot more painful. Um, when you have many more customers down the road. Because if you're even the fixing itself, right, fixing the process, it's still going to be a change of experience for your customers. It could be
Right.
potentially jolting because any change is not easy. So your company is
Yeah.
experiencing that, and then your customers are experiencing the change, even if it's for the better. They may have just gotten used to the bad way of
Yeah.
doing things,
Well,
right?
it's habit, right? I mean, if you're a customer for like 5 years, you know what to expect. And then if it changes, yeah, I've experienced that. Like, oh, this is better, but now I have to figure out how to deal with this. Like
Yeah.
this wasn't something on my radar to like deal with, but now I have to.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Something you talk quite a bit about that I found very refreshing and insightful is your approach to conscious design. I think you even have a podcast and all that fun stuff on conscious design. If I asked you like what is conscious design? What does that mean for you?
It is, and kind of how I arrived at it really is I came up with the Peterman method, which is my approach to like how do you launch a product. And something that kept coming up while I was going through that process, and then I was also asked, great question, like right at the beginning of pandemic, so I had some free time to think about it. Was like, what is your process, and how is it unique? And so like the first run was basically the Peterman method, which I have. Um, and then I really thought about, well, how did I arrive? How did I create that? How did I come up with that? And ultimately that's what conscious design is the design thinking process of, if you were to take my product focused Peterman method and take another step back as to the approach to it is conscious design. And it's really, I break it up. There's 4 pillars to it. It's observation, impact, connection, and then inclusion. And if you take that filter and you go through the product design process, that's how you're able to create a product that it makes money, it actually solves a need, it's good for the environment, it's good for people, and there's a lot of things that goes into it. There's ergonomics, which is, make it good, comfortable for people, make it enjoyable physically, which is great. And there's a lot of other kind of buzzword things like make it green. That was, even when I was in college, that was something that we were, but like what that meant was see if there's a biodegradable plastic, which there isn't really any, and then use the plastic anyway. Like that was that was the process. Or try to make it a metal so that it's super expensive, and then you have to go back to plastic anyway. So like the idea was take all of, because everybody's done conscious design to one degree or another, right? There's really ergonomic products. There's some amazing companies doing really, really great work that are using materials, finding new materials, creating new materials that are actually really good to use. You can actually replace plastic in some cases. You can, and it's growing. There's companies out here that are very inclusive. There's ones that are really supportive of indigenous people or more handcrafting, fair trade. Like there's a lot out there, but no one had really taken all of those things and put them in together as a framework that you could follow through. Like if you wanted to create one of those companies again, you could use this framework and you could arrive at whatever your product was, but in a similar space as those companies are. And there's a lot of people that I had talked to are like, oh, I want to make a company, but I need it to be inclusive, and I want it to make an impact, and I want, not just to make a product, but I want to make people's lives better. And so this was kind of my answer to that. I was like, well, here is the process that you can go through in order to deliver that in a way that's
Yeah,
actually going to make money so you can keep doing it. Because that's a huge part, right? If you don't make enough money, you can't make the impact you want. You're not going to make any impact. And so that is just pulling together design thinking and process and how you go about it. And it's been great. I put the book out there, and now I've done some talks with some fashion groups. So there's a huge interest in the fashion world now. That's growing because
that's cool.
they're trying to reduce waste and be more conscious. And so it's been great to like put it out there, and it starts to resonate with people, and it catches people's attention. So I think I picked the right name for it.
Yeah,
And I mean, it really, if you boil it down, it's just being conscious through the entire process and thinking ahead rather than just, oh, let's design a product and blah, 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 and then halfway through be like, and we should make it sustainable, but it's a little bit too late when you're getting ready for
yeah.
production. And so really helping create that, let's think through, because it's all been solved in one way or another. You just got to think through it, and then you'll have the right result.
I
So
love it. I'm looking at the resource here, and I will share that in the episode notes, link to the podcast, and other links for you. Um, One thing that would be useful, I think, what would you for entrepreneurs, early stage or otherwise, or more advanced, right, who are thinking about building more conscious products? Um, what would you say? What would your advice be to them? To thinking about it, obviously, listen to your podcast, read your book,
yep.
but what are some things that, or even one thing that comes to mind to put someone on a good path towards that?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing is observation and impact. And they're the first two pillars that I have for conscious design. It sounds very easy, right? Which is the hardest things usually are, but it also yields the most results. And I've done this talk a little bit. I've shared this, and there's a lot of people on the, well, let's build a product, and like I think we're solving a thing, try to launch it. Like there's this mentality of, we'll just launch everything really, really quickly, which is fine if I think you are also doing it in order to observe and see what's working and see what the impact is. And a lot of people don't think about those things necessarily at the beginning. And there's plenty of entrepreneurs that are like, I want to be impactful with my thing, and that's great, but not everyone does. And I think if you take that a little bit step farther and you really think through, like, what is the, especially for like physical products, what is the end of life of this product? And I work with so many startups, most don't think about that. They're just, oh, got to make a product and get it out there. Like, we got to get to
Yeah,
that profit line, which is, I mean, obviously that has to be a goal, right? You are in business to provide value and get value back, usually in the
yeah,
form of cash, but you're going to have a much better impact if you really think through that entire process. And so, like, unless you've done, you can show me all the research, in which case we'll probably still do this a little bit. We have all the startups that we work with go through a discovery process where we walk through all this, and we say, here's everything that you're trying to do, here's the actual path, here's all the things to think about, supply chain, who's involved, what are the impact to you, your team, your community, like, is this the impact you want? How do we, and we can go really deep with that, or we can go, if it's something you want to get a little, iterate a little bit more, or if it's easier, like a digital product, you can iterate that a bit faster than a physical
yeah,
one. We can
yeah.
tailor it, but going through that process, even just yourself, is really important.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Ian. I appreciate you sharing your experience, sharing advice, and I am super excited for more collaborations with you. Got exciting things going on, and I can't wait to engage more.
Amazing. Well, I'm excited. Thanks so much for joining me. It's been good.